spirit of this revolution is not going away.
This is the Ron Paul Liberty Report with Ron Paul, Daniel McAdams, and Chris Rossini.
We are all ambassadors of the Ron Paul doctrine, and it's so simple. Just tell the truth.
An idea whose time has come cannot be stopped by any army or any government.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning into the Ron Paul Liberty Report. With us today, we have Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you this morning.
Happy Monday, Dr. Paul. How are you today?
Doing well.
Good.
Doing
All
well.
right. All right.
But we still have a problem or two. We're still in business of trying to sort things out. Seeking the truth is not all that easy when you figure how many people are seeking to hide the truth.
Yeah, that's for sure.
It shouldn't be that hard. Truth should be easily known and understood. But if the majority of the people in the world still look for, fuzzy answers and discrepancies and political things, it makes it a little difficult to find out exactly where the truth lies. So we're going to make an attempt at this because that's what our goal is. That's what we talk about essentially every week, or more than every week, is trying to figure out what really is going on. And we came across a couple things, and one we want to start off with is an article about coalition building. And that sounds good to me. We should have a coalition. So we want to get together and work out our problems. But this has to do with the war that's going on, that I believe it's safe to say, and not embellishing at all, the war we started unnecessarily.
Yeah.
And we've done that once or twice before. We've been very much involved in warmongering. And we always quit after 2 years, after 10 years, after 20 years.
Yeah.
We finally quit. But the American people, basically over the years, have been too complacent as far as I'm concerned. Too complacent, but hopefully they're starting to wake up. Get non-complacent earlier on because of what's coming, and that is oil shortage, gasoline prices going up, other prices going up, and they start to realize, hey, this is costing us a lot of money. So this is an article that says White House. That's the White House. Let me tell you what they're doing. White House wants to build a coalition on Iran to address the energy crisis. Doesn't that strike you as a little bit weird? There is an energy crisis, but who in thunder created it? It must have been Russia. Russia probably did all this. And White House tries to build a coalition, and they're being met with some resistance. It seems like when there's a coalition, up until now at least, when there's bombs to be dropped and land to be taken and Middle East problems, there's been easier to get a coalition put together. But there was one article that goes along with this that I found fascinating. And that is, under the circumstances here, Zero Hedge reports, Hormuz thaw, ? Besant says Iranian oil tankers can transit as vessels traffic pick up. Now, what does he have to do with that place off there? Wasn't he worried about the Gulf of Mexico or something, or Chesapeake Bay? They could worry about that, but no. He's getting permission. But that goes to show this thing is mixed up. And Daniel, I know you can straighten this out and get us to understand exactly what's going on here and what we can contribute to the solution.
Well, after the sneak attack last June, when the U.S. was in talks with Iran and they were attacked, and then the buildup toward the end of the year now and the beginning of the new year, Iran said two things. If you attack us again, we will close the Strait of Hormuz, and we will hit your military bases in the Gulf. The U.S. President Trump, in particular, didn't seem to care. He didn't believe them. He thought they were bluffing. He went with a feeling, quote unquote, according to Carolyn Levitt. He went with the feeling and attacked anyway. Well, it turns out that Iran wasn't bluffing. They were telling the truth. And they have hit and destroyed every U.S. military base. And now they're hitting places like our embassy in Baghdad, They took out one radar installation, I think it was yesterday, and they're aiming for the other, and they closed the Strait of Hormuz. Well, lo and behold, oil's up was up at 110, I think, a few days ago. Now I think it opened this morning just over 100. You would know better than I. The problem is that's put the administration in a crisis now, because this could cause massive problems. It's not just oil, but without ships going through the Strait of Hormuz, not only oil, not only liquid natural gas, but you have urea, which is a key component in fertilizer. It's spring, it's the planting season. You're not going to have fertilizer going through, et cetera, et cetera. So now there's a crisis. Because the strait isn't closed with a bunch of guns necessarily aiming at it. It's the implication that they can be shot. Boats can be shot. Cargo ships can be shot. So, of course, nobody can get insurance. No insurance company is going to take that risk. It's impossible. And so it's de facto closed. But we know there is that threat that it'll be closed. So now there is a crisis. Nobody knows what to do about it. And so a few days after Trump having repeatedly declared victory, and I have a clip of that, now President Trump put out and I have the post that he did on social media, essentially begging and demanding that other countries come to our aid in a mess that we created and reopen the Strait of Hormuz.
You know so well the work we did together in the first part of this century about Iraq, the Middle Eastern War. I imagine it was probably 10 years that thing went on. And we were going to give them democracy, and there'd be no cost to us. Few people may die, but we'll get the oil and pay all the bills. Well, none of that came about. And yet, it's been relatively quiet. You didn't have Baghdad in the news every single day, but it's back in the news again.
Yeah.
They're getting involved. So, and of course, we never really left Baghdad. At times the fighting can quit, and it sounds like, oh, there's peace, but not the peace they promised when we, had so many people die, both enemies and allies, that they end up with a mess. Then they hide it, and they're tired, and we're exhausted. But it's always there because of the overall foreign policy that is accepted in a bipartisan way. Everybody argues for bipartisanship, and at times, coalition building is one thing, and that's different. But they get together, and they together they allow presidents to do way too much, and together they provide all the money they want. Yeah. And together they participate in the propaganda, and the people don't get aroused. But we're hoping that we're seeing the signs that maybe all that's going to change, because we're running out of money, and the people are starting to resist. Not only some of our allies are starting to resist and not automatically join the coalition because Trump, threatens them, either with bombs or tariffs or whatever, or handouts. So these things do come to an end, but sometimes they end poorly and they linger. And if they don't, if the wars aren't motivated and correctly understood, they really don't quit. And certainly the Middle East has been going on for a long, long time. But now Trump is looking for his allies to come to his rescue.
Yeah, now here's the piece, this Wall Street Journal, that talks about it. The White House tries to build coalition. I think that's a generous way of putting, tries to build a coalition. No, it's desperate to have someone take a chestnuts out of the fire. You go to the next one. Trump and his top aides spent the weekend framing the Iran operation as a resounding military success, while imploring other countries to join their effort to resolve a worsening energy crisis related to the Strait of Hormuz. The Trump administration, as soon as this week, and I highlight this, plans to announce that multiple countries have agreed to form a coalition, we'll come back to that in a second, that will escort ships through the waterway, which runs around along the Iranian coast, U.S. officials said. The U.S. and potential countries are still discussing whether those operations would begin before or after the war ends. That is a critical sentence, Dr. Paul, because everything hinges on that. Because if it's after the war ends, of course, there's no need of a coalition because the war is over. Right. So this is what they're trying to cover, the fact that nobody is coming to our aid. And they say, hey, maybe we'll have a coalition after the war's over, when there's no more threat. So what's the point of having warships escorting cargo ships through the strait if the war is over? It makes zero sense. So it's a cockamamie scheme that's meant to try to divert attention from the fact that things are not going well.
For our activities in this area, in a broad area over there, the best cheerleader for it, domestically, it's probably a South Carolina senator, go. But internationally, it has to be Netanyahu. He's been cheering this on. So I'm wondering if he's trying to build a coalition. Netanyahu comes to visit us quite frequently.
Yeah.
He gets to speak on the House floor. Why doesn't he? Why don't they get him to participate? It says if they need more troops and all this stuff. I mean, he participated in the decision making. So I think that this whole thing that we participate in is misleading because it's so chopped up and special interests and this and that. It has so little to do with the national defense, true national defense, and it's always designed for characteristic reason. Well, we're going to be bombed soon, and there's nuclear power there, and we have to stop it. Well, we already stopped it 3 months ago, 6 months ago, and we destroyed it, and they didn't even have it then. But we still are after the nuclear power over in Iran. It keeps on and on. But right now, it's sort of a pseudo stalemate, at least for a pause. So the oil prices sort of backed off, and yet I would say they have a long way to go before this gets really settled, where neighbors can be neighbors again.
Well, I've got a couple of video clips, Dr. Paul, to give us a sense of what's going on. I'm just going to start with a review, because this is Trump about 20 times last week. You might want to get your earpiece and listen to President Trump about 20 times last week. This happens to be him in Kentucky at a rally, but you can find clips of him saying essentially the same thing over and over and over again. Here, let's listen to what he says.
Great name. Well, it's only good if you win. You can only do. And we've won. Let me say, we've won. You never like to say too early you won. We won. We won the bet. In the first hour, it was over. But we won. But they gave me a list of names.
We won the war.
Sure,
So that's him saying it. Now go to the next one. Now this is Pete Hegseth, who is really starting to look like not the sharpest knife in the drawer. He's explaining that the Strait of Hormuz, Dr. Paul, is not closed. Let's listen to, you can read the list. Let's listen to Hegseth.
Only thing prohibiting transit in the Straits right now is Iran shooting at shipping. It is open for transit should Iran not do that.
The
only
Straits
thing
are not closed, Dr. Paul. The only thing that's interfering is that Iran keeps shooting at ships. So that's the problem.
My little thing.
And here's something that, one other one that I came, because this shows actually more the seriousness of the situation. This is a former administration advisor on energy, and I came across this on X today. This is from a short clip from 60 Minutes. If we listen to this one, put that back in. This is the last one.
I've worked in the White House during an energy crisis. There are no policy solutions to a prolonged closure of the Strait of Hormuz.
You're saying there's not much a White House, a president can do to stop this bleeding.
You open up the toolkit, and the tools in there, the options range from marginal through symbolic to deeply unwise. Escorts are a sideshow. Strategic stock releases are a sideshow.
Gas tax holiday?
Gas tax holiday, sideshow. You got to restore the flow of the Strait of Hormuz.
Even if the White House, President Trump, declared an end of this war today, tomorrow, is there any guarantee that Iran would open up the strait and it's back to business as usual?
No guarantee. It's not like there's a big gate that swings open in front of the Hormuz and Iran locks the gate. So all Iran has to do is demonstrate every day, every other day, that it has the means and the ability to attack ships in the strait, and that will be enough.
So here's somebody who knows what he's talking about, saying it can't be fixed. It can't be fixed. I mean, why wasn't Trump talking to him before he went into this mess?
They pretend they have meetings is secret, though.
Yeah.
What they're really talking about is something that nobody else is allowed. It's sometimes I think they don't even tell the president exactly what they're talking about in there.
Yeah.
And sometimes the president tell them either. Well, certainly the American people do not hear the full story. And that's why the founders try to protect us against this type of a mess. And that's why only the people through their Congress can go to war. But we haven't done that. We haven't done that, a good many years since World War II.
Yeah.
And that's why we have this. We don't know what we're doing, when it's over, what the end point is, where you're going to get the money. Are there people supporting it? Will other people join you? Yeah, I have none of that because it's done with a few people. So it's down to it's done in secret, where the American people not only don't get to participate, they hardly hear about it, and if they do, they can't trust it.
Yeah.
And that's healthy, because the American people should, and they are waking up that just because the government says so, something that you don't have to take it hook, line, and sinker.
Absolutely. Well, here's President Trump's post on his Truth Social on Saturday that set up this whole situation we're talking about. If you put that next one up. And I don't think I'm going to read all of it, but I'll give you the gist of it. Many countries, especially those who are affected by Iran's attempted closure of the Hormuz Strait, will be sending warships, in conjunction with the United States of America to keep the strait open and safe. We have already destroyed 100% of Iran's military capability, but it's easy for them to send a drone or two, drop a mine, or deliver a close-range missile somewhere along or in this waterway, no matter how badly defeated they are. Hopefully, China, France, Japan, South Korea, the UK, and others that are affected by this artificial constraint will send ships to the area so the Hormuz Strait will no longer be a threat by a nation that has been totally decapitated. In the meantime, the U.S. will be bombing the blank out of the shoreline and continually shooting Iranian boats and ships out of the sea, out of the water. One way or other, we will get the Strait of Hormuz open, safe, and free. President Donald J. Trump. Now, the person who reposted this made a very clever quip. Catherine Rampell said, "So we need help to open the strait that is already open to help protect it from the enemy. We actually defeated 100%. So that is...
Maybe they haven't defined who is the enemy.
Yeah. And so here's the result. If you go to the next one, he said he's demanding that they come and work with us with their warships to open the strait. So far, it does not look good. If we go to that next clip here, Monit Chawen, this is not a good scorecard right now, Dr. Paul. If we can have that up. The next, yeah, there we go. Doesn't look good, Dr. Paul. He said they're going to come to our rescue. Italy rejected, Spain rejected, Japan rejected, France hesitant. Since this came out, they've actually said no. Norway rejected, Canada rejected, Australia rejected, Germany rejected, China, no response, UK, no commitment, Netherlands, no response, South Korea, no confirmation. The poster points out America looks increasingly isolated.
You're so negative. That was a pretty good coalition. Oh, they're not.
They all said no.
They're all against us,
Yeah.
against our foreign policy. The one thing is that he stays in there that they've defeated everything. There's nothing left.
Obliterated.
They have no weapons. Nobody's allowed to have guns, I guess, or something. But they've just totally destroyed all military ability to defend themselves. The one thing they don't even if they got rid of a lot of weapons and ships and things like that, the one thing they can't stop, and I've mentioned this before, is the spirit of the homeland.
Yeah.
I mean, it does the opposite. The people, I mean, the Iranians have been putting up with this for a long time, and I make 1953 a really big date when the coalition was small, but we've been trying to own, run, and control the oil out of Iran for all this period of time, and it's hasn't stopped. But it looks like this time there may be a climactic end to this, one way or the other, and who knows what that's going to be. But it's not going to be done by next week. A very key meeting between these two factions, and they come up with a solution like, we're going to agree both sides to mind our own business.
Yeah.
So see you later. We'll
Yeah.
go fishing together.
Well, you make a great point, which is that they keep claiming all of the things that they knocked down and broke and everything, but it's irrelevant. Just like as with Vietnam. Remember, I mean, I was little, but I do remember when people talking about it, and there would be a nightly press conference where the general would stand up there and say, we dropped 4,000 bombs in this area. We flew 800 sorties over here. And it was this whole long laundry list of all the things they did, but it was irrelevant.
The Vietnamese were underground drinking coffee.
Yeah, they probably were. And it's also similar with the war in Russia, how misunderstood the Russia-Ukraine war is, because they'll say, well, Russia's not taking very much land right away. Well, that's not what they're fighting. They're fighting a war of attrition. Iran is fighting an asymmetric war. They don't have an air force. They don't have a navy. They have missiles. So they're fighting in an asymmetric way. So it really is like comparing apples and oranges when you say, but we've blown up a lot of their stuff. Why are they still fighting?
Don't you find it sort of ironic that this backward country has some defense, and they're called drones, and they cost a little bit less than the missiles that we're using, and that they're actually winning some of these wars and battles by using weapons that are a little bit less costly. So they've designed a position where maybe the pause is, well, we have to build some more weapons again. We have to collect more money from the taxpayer. We have to run the printing machines.
But Iran also has some of the most sophisticated missiles in the world. You know, they have multiple hypersonic. We have zero hypersonic. So they have been able to develop the technology that they're able to use. So let's move on to our second story, since we're getting short on time, but it really is worth a mention, Dr. Paul. You and I both noticed this, and it's very alarming. If you go to that New York Times, we're going to skip a couple. This is going to shock, hopefully it will shock some of our viewers. FCC chair threatens to revoke broadcasters' licenses over war coverage. The comment came from Brendan Carr. It came on the heels of a social media message from President Trump criticizing the news media's coverage of the war with Iran. If you go to the next one, Brendan Carr, chairman of the FCC, threatened on Saturday to revoke broadcasters' licenses over their coverage of the war with Iran, the latest move in a campaign to stomp out what he sees as liberal bias in broadcasts. As the war entered its third week, Carr accused broadcasters of, quote, running hoaxes and news distortions in a social media post, and warned them to correct course before their license renewals come up. That, I think, is very chilling, Dr. Paul.
You know, I don't think the sign is up yet, but the sign that I hang up here is beware, danger ahead.
Yeah.
Truth cannot be tolerated.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. But it's our government is doing that to us, as well as, saying that, well, we're trying to, be in a position where we can finally defeat all these people who are the revolutionaries. Oh, yeah, but we have a little gasoline we have to use because we have to go 6,000 miles in order to find this war. The whole thing makes no sense. There's no practical sense to it. There's no moral sense to it. There's no constitutional sense to this. And the sad part, and this won't be well received by some, and that is it's tolerated way too much by the American people. But I lead that up to the educational system that we have, that they've been indoctrinated for a long time, because you want to be safe. And you want to be patriotic, you want to serve your country, and therefore they have built it into the system that one of the proudest things you can do when you're 18, and I've seen it where parents even are saying, oh, my son is going on to war to save our country, which is so sick, and that's a condition that is not sensible, and it's unnecessary, and one thing that they and that's the propaganda machine. So the combination of the machine out there and the willingness because they don't believe they're committing a sin by lying. They're doing God's work because this is a holy war. And in many ways, it's a holy war for on both sides sometimes. It enters into the equation.
Definitely. Well, Carr kind of displays this boomer mentality that they can just shut down the news. We're going to shut down CBS and shut down CNN if you don't report positive things about the war. I'm sorry, this is no longer 1975. People are doing all sorts of their own research. There are so many sources. There's X, there's Telegram. There are so many sources of news about what actually is happening in the war. There's absolutely no way they can put the cork back in this. They can't put the genie back in the bottle here. So all of this posturing and bloviating about we're going to remove your licenses, nobody's going to even notice if CBS loses their license or CNN loses their license. No one watches it.
All that started when the radios became available. That's when they passed the first act that the government has to be involved.
Yeah, exactly.
But it of course should have been the whole issue here. I think the whole issue of the First Amendment should be a property rights issue. If you're in your home or in your church, you ought to be able to say anything you want, but that doesn't mean you get licensed to go out in the public square and disturb the peace and this sort of thing. So I think property rights and that's what happened back when radio first came out with the licensing, is to make sure they wouldn't broadcast bad news. We want to keep them honest. So we assign that task to our government to make sure everybody's telling you the truth. And it doesn't seem to work very well.
Yeah, absolutely not. Well, I'm going to close out then, I guess. And if you put that very last clip up, if you're following our coverage of the Iran war, you're going to want to come down here in just about 5 weeks' time, 5 weeks, I guess. War is back on the menu. It will be the Ron Paul Institute's spring conference down here in Lake Jackson, Texas. For those of you holding out, waiting for speaker announcements, come on, guys. I never let you down, trust me. But I will have a couple of big announcements this week. But don't wait. Get those tickets right away. This is a smaller conference than our DC conference, and the tickets are more limited. So you don't want to miss out on this. Yeah, great speakers, but also great people who are thinking about and are concerned about the same things you are thinking about and concerned about. Maybe it's the draft. Maybe it's prices. Maybe it's just wanting to have someone who's like-minded to get to know. This is the real value of these conferences. So get those tickets. I will put a link in the description. I forgot to do it this morning. It's Monday. But if I don't, or if you want to get it right away, just go to ronpaulinstitute.org. On the top, you will see a link to get you more info and your tickets. We appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you.
Very good. I'm looking forward to the conference. And one point that I try to make at all the conferences every time I speak out on these issues is that the point is that economic policy and foreign policy cannot be separated. Sometimes people claim that a war can end a depression, and other times they say that we can have economic policy will solve all our problems if you use the force and foreign policy, and we will take over their oil and all that nonsense that goes on. But you can't separate the two. It comes together, and that invites another significant fact that cannot be ignored is how do you pay for these? Yes, you can use guns and force them to do things for a while, but eventually the bills have to be paid. And that's why I think there's so much chaos right now, or the bills have come due and people don't know exactly how you pay these bills, and they're not exactly interested in doing it because it's very costly, and somebody has to pay these bills. So this is why I think relating whether it's economic policy or foreign policy to the issue of how do you pay for all these wonderful things that people are going to do for us is so important. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.
Thanks for watching the Ron Paul Liberty Report. Like and subscribe to help spread the message. And until next time, live